Hello again, welcome to the University of Nottingham. I'm joined today by Professor William Kay, who is Professor of Theology at Glyndŵr University and is talking to me today about Pentecostalism. And the particular topic that we've chosen for this film is Pentecostalism, healing for the world. So healing is pretty important within Pentecostalism, isn't it? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, well, Pentecostals would characteristically emphasize Isaiah 52 and the healing that occurs in relation to the atonement. So he was bruised for our iniquities. He carried our sorrows and our pains. So the idea that Christ not only dies for the sins of the world, but also, in a sense, dies for the sicknesses of the world. And so that, characteristically, Pentecostal evangelists would argue, say, Christ died for your sins, but also he died to take away your infirmities, your pains. He died that you might be physically well. So characteristically, Pentecostal evangelists would associate the two. And there's a connection in the Gospels. In Matthew 8, there's a link back to the Isaiah text. So they would see people as coming to Christ and, as it were, a wholeness, a healing that is not just spiritual but also physical.
So what sort of conditions would Pentecostals, medical conditions I'm thinking of, see as being healable? And how would they go about this?
Well, I mean, the kind of long kind of story here, but the sort of backstory is that they're sort of healing homes in the 19th century, and this is much sort of quieter and background and a use of the James 5 text. People lay hands on people, anoint them with oil, pray for them, and then keep doing that and trust that people gradually recover. But the healing evangelists are much more inclined to say, come forward, we'll pray for you and you'll be healed. And they'd expect instantaneous healing at the end of a large meeting and rally. And so we have this kind of, we really have two theologies. We have a theology of evangelism, where healing is seen as Mark 16, as a confirmation of the gospel, but also within the church. And most Pentecostal churches would see praying for the sick as part of what they do. So the pastor would be someone who would pray for people that they might be healed. Now, not everybody is healed, and there are all kinds of complications when people aren't healed or die, and there are tragedies and sorrows. But nevertheless, many Pentecostals would see that the first port of call would be to go and ask to be prayed for, to see whether they would be healed in the service. So the church becomes a place of healing. And if I go out to Asian Pentecostalism, they would often see that healing as extending beyond the church into the community. So that healing would be seen as a kind of shalom or wholeness. And so it's to do with my relationships with the rest of my family, my relationships with my neighbour, and so on. So the healing involves a healing of my body, but also a healing much bigger and wider and beyond my kind of physical being.
Yes, because our whole approach to healing is very culturally conditioned, isn't it? So obviously in Asia, the understanding of well-being is going to be different from in other parts of the world.
Yes.
I mean, I can see with some aspects of, the kind of public healing and expecting that miracles will be achieved. That has the potential to be quite risky, doesn't it? I mean, it exposes vulnerable people to abuse potentially, doesn't it?
It does, and there have been problems with this, and even sort of litigation. Pentecostal preachers arrested for practicing medicine without a license, and so on. So there have definitely been issues with this. But Pentecostals would still see it as part of the mission of the church to offer healing within the normal life of the church. So rather than sort of be scared that might be a problem, say, well, we will pray for you. And that's one of the things where, because if you have this sense of everybody in the congregation has been filled with the Spirit, has been So you end up actually with, say, a house group where 6 people might gather around a particular person who's got a problem and all lay hands on them and all pray for them. So you end up with a sense of, well, let's all care for this person. So there is a kind of tactile...
That's the gentler, more low-key.
Gentler, more low-key. But it's the same kind of theology insofar as there's a conscious theology of that. So you will find in many big Pentecostal churches, mega churches, you will find them broken down into cell or house groups, and that those house groups will allow people not just to study scripture together, but also to meet together and to have a cup of coffee or tea together, but also to pray together. And if someone has a problem, then people will pray for that person. So it's a supportive group for individuals.
Can you say a bit more about mega churches? Because that's a feature of Pentecostalism, I think possibly elsewhere in the world more than in Britain. But tell us a bit more.
Well, the mega churches are usually churches of over 1,000. Perhaps you define those over 2,000. And the biggest Pentecostal church in the world is in South Korea. It's said to have over 700,000. So it's a vast.
700,000. Good heavens. Yes.
I mean, I've been to it, and it has something like 6 or 8 morning services, and people just come to church, 10,000 people at a time, and then they go, and the next group come in, and so on. So it's just a huge church. There are mega churches in the UK. There are about, I think, 12 or so. In fact, there's an AHRC project on mega churches. Some of them are Nigerian-based, and we haven't talked about that. But these are churches of over 1,000 usually, and of course they have huge resources, and they start to make a difference to the community because they've got the resources to put on some kind of social program. In fact, one of the things that's happened, and this is again something to do with healing in the world, from congregations you end up with humanitarian activities. So there's a book written by Miller and Yamamori called Progressive Pentecostalism, which shows that a huge number of single mother, drug rehabilitation, and other kinds of activities stem from the heart of worshipping congregations. So you actually have Pentecostals who go, in fact there's some famous occasions where they go out into prisons, and the pastors will actually go to prison in, say, Rio de Janeiro, and they will minister to the prisoners in the prison, having themselves been locked up with the prisoners. So there are all kinds of examples. The Teen Challenge with Dave Wilkerson was an example of someone who went out into the streets of New York to reach drug addicts and would pray for them and expect them to be baptized in the Spirit, and the baptism in the Spirit would be the way in which they would do cold turkey and come off the drugs.
So that's an interesting, one imagines that the risk of a megachurch is that everything, it becomes total society. So you only need, as a member of the megachurch, you only need to engage with people who are in it. But obviously this missionary pull is a sort of corrective to that.
Yes, it is, although you would also be right in what you said, that there can be a sort of microclimate.
Yes,
and you live in
way of avoiding the rest of the world.
Yes, it is a kind of sort of semi-Christianized world you live in, and it's like a shopping mall. That's the kind of shopping mall model. So you can go to your megachurch, and I've been to megachurches where after church there's a restaurant, and you go and have your lunch in the church because there are people, and then there's in America Little League Baseball. And there are holidays for people from the church, so over 50s can all go on holiday together, and so on. And there's a whole load of stuff going on in the church, complete microclimate. But they are, as I say, they generate huge resources and they can make a difference. And in some countries they make a difference politically because they start getting involved in the politics. So say in the Philippines or in Latin America, they start to engage with politicians and they can bring in votes. So they challenge politicians on moral issues as well. So they are a useful corrective to bribable politicians. Because sometimes the churches themselves can be corrupted and the pastors can end up not standing against the corruption as they should. But basically it's the wielding of resources in a community. And there's a sort of doctrine of transformation from some megachurches. So they will go to a place and they will seek to transform the community. So where there's prostitution and drug addiction, they'll seek to change that total environment and to convert the drug addicts convert the prostitutes, and then move in and make the place acceptable for other people to live.
Okay, one final question, William. What would you see as the future for Pentecostalism?
I think it's going to be diverse. I think it'll become more diffuse, more diverse, particularly where it's active in Africa and in India. And I think that diversity will mean that parts of it will kind of become more liturgical, more settled, less adventurous, and then there will be kind of pulses of renewal that will occur, and so there will be kind of re-Pentecostalisation of Pentecostals, and I think those two things will happen at once.
That's interesting, because that would suggest a similar pattern to what was witnessed within Methodism, actually.
I think, well, I haven't said this, but I think, in fact, Pentecostalism originally spread down many of the paths that were set by the early Methodists.
Thank you, William. That's been very helpful insight into the global reach of Pentecostalism. Thank you very much.